Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1 of Iron Fist. So before I get into any spoilers, I will just kind of give my spoiler-free thoughts about the season. I really liked it. I'll go ahead and admit, I don't remember if I brought this up in Luke Cage, but even if I did, I'll reiterate it here. I went into this not really knowing too much about Iron Fist / Danny Rand. Much like Luke Cage, the only reason why I know anything about Danny at all is because of Ultimate Spider-Man. There's even an episode. I don't really know if there's any more episodes that pop up later on, but I definitely know there's at least one episode that kind of dives a little more into his background, with the whole Kunlun thing. So because of that, I do have some knowledge of who he is and kind of the circumstances around everything. So I went into this knowing that, but other than that, I don't really know that much about him. So I really appreciate the series. Very good action. What I also I thought was kind of interesting is it has a very different fighting style than Daredevil. Obviously there's similarities, but it's Daredevil was more like a beat you down to your hurt type of thing. This was more so they just knock you unconscious until you're unable to keep fighting. They kind of make you yield. It wasn't to beat you down to almost like a bloody pulp, which isn't. I feel like that's kind of where Daredevil kind of went a lot of times. I think it just shows you kind of a very different distinction between who Daredevil is versus who Iron Fist is. I mean, don't get me wrong, Iron Fist has some moments where it would beat people down to a bloody pulp. But, it was never that often. It's not even I feel like Daredevil went to the route of breaking bones a lot more. There was some bone breaking here and there in Iron Fist, but I feel like it wasn't nearly as often as Daredevil. I mean, granted, I might be thinking it happened a lot more, but I feel like it definitely did a lot more in Daredevil. And I mean, in either season, but I also felt the fights were a little bloodier in Daredevil. So to me, it was just kind of a big distinction. I was you just can't help but notice that. Plus, it's just overall the fighting style is very different, just because it's the way everyone in this series is trained, where their training takes them and stuff like that. So, I also know, to me, it had a very different, I don't know if pacing would be the right word, but definitely, the whole Rand storyline. I can see where some people would come from where they wouldn't like that storyline as much because it's slower than any other series, but I appreciate it, and I really liked it because I was actually very interested to see, how the whole Rand storyline would play out, and I actually really appreciate how it all played out and where it took certain characters, whether it be, I won't say that character's name, going into spoilers, but Ward and Joy, to see where their storylines took them to. I wasn't expecting things to play out the way they did, so that was really interesting, as well as other people that popped up. But like I said, I'll kind of get into that in a little bit. So I just kind of wanted to get those thoughts out there. I really liked it. To me, this has made me super excited to see what they would do with the season 2, but also what this means going forward, because, it's the next thing on the list should be the Defenders, at least to my knowledge. I haven't really looked into it too much, but, obviously, because even during the trailers, they were meet Iron Fist, the next, the final Defender. So it's already been set up. Not unless the next one's going to be the Punisher, but I'm pretty sure it is going to be the Defenders. I'm very interested to see, what's going to happen to bring everyone together. So, I mean, so that's really the end of my thoughts. So I'll go ahead and say it here and now. If you have not watched, not even just watched, if you have not finished Iron Fist, do that now. I mean, I highly recommend you do watch it, but, also don't listen to this if you haven't finished it, because I will be going into spoilers. I will be all over the place. I won't be doing anything in particular order, so don't be expecting, I'll do it episode by episode. It's no, whatever comes to my head, I'll start just going on tangents about. So if you have not watched / finished Iron Fist, do not listen to this. If you want to, you can come back to this after you've watched it and listen to my thoughts on it entirely. Don't feel obligated to. So, And like I said, final warning: you're into spoiler territory now. So, okay, so there's a lot of things. Kind of bounce around different things. For one, when it comes to action and stuff like that, I have two particular favorite ones. One is when Joy is being taken by the Hatchet Man. I really like that fight in the hallway, but I really like the little elevator fight too, where it's he's fighting 3 or 4 Hatchet Men, and he's also trying to keep Joy out the way too. I thought that was pretty sick. But I also like the one where it's him and Davos, like when you're escaping that hand compound, fighting those dudes in the hallway like that. Um, but probably my all-time favorite action scene literally has to be the one because I was wondering where it was because it was in the trailer. Like he kind of does like a ground pound with the Iron Fist, and I was like, okay, where is that at? And then it pops up, and I'm super hands down like was like the most hyped about that. I was like, oh my god, that was sick because they did the slow mo, and I've brought it up countless times, especially when it comes to superhero stuff. I love me some slow mo, and it was just like destructive and just looked so badass. Just the way he just kind of like cartwheel, kind of like midair, like cartwheel, kind of flipped and then did it, and just how it just sent everyone up, like crumpled the ground and just shattered. When it was just epic, it was just like thank you. And I mean, they saved it for the best. They saved it like that was like their big like Iron Fist moment to me. So I am like a little sad that I'll go ahead and say that he never really got in like a particular outfit. I mean, granted, to be fair, Jessica Jones never got one either, and Luke Cage didn't necessarily get one. I mean, his kind of was just like being in a suit. I did appreciate that. So like the only one so far that really has like a legit costume. I mean, to be fair, Jessica did have hers for like a little while when she was trying to be a superhero, but after that she just kept it casual. The only one that has like full on suit is like Daredevil, you know. So I really appreciate it. Probably one of my other favorites is just anytime Colleen fought just because I like her. I mean, just because I like sword fighting in general, especially katanas. I think they are one of my favorite swords to be seen kind of used in fighting. But nevertheless, I thought her storyline was very interesting. I mean, for multiple things, just because it's like, for one, the whole like her fighting for money type of situation, which I mean, I thought that was kind of interesting that Danny was like, "Oh, I'm not going to judge you." I was like, "Oh, I'm surprised." I would have assumed he would have, but he didn't, because I felt like he would have been like, "Oh, you're tainting the martial arts style" or something like that. But it's like, no, for Danny, it was a sense of like, no, like, you know, it's like you do whatever you need to, like, you know, I guess. I don't know. Wasn't expecting him to be so okay with it. But I wasn't expecting her to do it either, especially because she got on her student Daryl so much about it. But it's a sense of like, I guess it's kind of something that was kind of like floated around the series. Like everyone bottled up their emotions. Like it was just like, you know, I guess that kind of everyone kind of leaned more towards a route of violence. It's kind of something Claire even brought up, which I'll kind of, you know, dive into Claire in a little bit later on. But how Colleen like just like fought dudes and just like she enjoyed the fight, like the thrill, like she wanted to hurt people is kind of how she put it. I mean, to me, I thought that was kind of interesting, especially when you see where her storyline goes, because it seemed like, I guess it was kind of a reflection of that. Like she makes it seem like, because I mean, the twist finding out that she was part of the hand, did not see that coming. I was like, okay, who are these guys? Like, why do they have like so many people like on their side? And then she's talking about like, oh, telling Bakuto like, oh, I don't want to keep lying to Danny. I'm like, lying about what? It's like, I didn't piece it together. Like Danny went into the room and saw something. He was looking at it, and I was like, okay, what's so significant about that? And then he points it out. I'm like, oh, they're the hand, because something that was going into my head, because, you know, because Gao had told him that, and I was like, they're the hand? Really? I did not see that coming. It's like, that makes sense. Because I have this loose, because I looked it up like a while back. It just because I was on like a Marvel binge of just like looking crap up. And I did find out that basically like Elektra and Daredevil, maybe even Iron Fist, I don't remember if his name was on the list, but there were certain people who were associated with the hand, like in particular like Daredevil. And I was like, huh, why is that? Did he go evil for a while in the comic books or something? Or is the hand, like, I guess at different points in times is a situation where it's like, because at first I was kind of buying into the whole thing. I was like, oh, so is there a good hand and bad hand? I was like, oh, is Gal like a former member? It's like, no, Gal's like full on in the hand, but it's like a sense of like, the hand was divided between the people. There were some who were loyal to Gal, but I guess Bakuto has some. I mean, Bakuto isn't like the top dog, because there was a guy that Bakuto wanted to introduce Danny too, because he was like, oh, like the leader would like to meet you. So it's like, obviously there's someone like way above even him. So like, but there are multiple factions within the hand. Like obviously we met Gal's people, we met Bakuto. So I was just thought that was kind of interesting, just kind of a whole power struggle. situation. But it's like the concept that there being a bad hand and a good hand. I was wondering about it. I do appreciate Claire's joke of like, oh, can't you be something else? Like, what was it? Like the toes or the arm? Like, that way you can distinguish you from being the hand. It's like, I mean, especially because like, I mean, that hit everyone so hard. I mean, and everyone had the right to be frustrated. It's like, Danny, it's like, I was trained by Kunlun to destroy the hand. That's literally why I'm the Iron Fist. And for Claire, it's like she literally was attacked by the hand in Daredevil, and one of her friends died because of the hand. It's like you knew that, and yet you're here trying to claim that you're here fighting alongside with trying to defeat the hand. But it's like that turns out not to be the case. It's like now I find out that you are part of the hand. Which I feel like out of anyone, she was slightly more forgiving than Danny. But I mean, like, even she did bring it up. She was like, okay, I am being a bit of a hypocrite because I'm up here defending you to Danny. And the moment you're here, I'm chewing you out about it. So, but she's like, I didn't expect her story to go the way it did. I was actually thinking she was going to stay in the hand the entire time, like still trying to convince Danny, and they'd have to like eventually fight because they'd be on opposite sides. But it's like, no, she eventually saw, Bakuto for who he was, just because like he tried to kill her, because it's like, oh, you were told to bring Danny to tell me when you found Danny, but you didn't. It's like, well, Danny's hurt. She could have been like, Danny was hurt. I'll try to get him meds and stuff like that, ease him into it. Like she was going to bring him to you, but it's like she wanted to talk to him first because it's like she cares for him and everything. Which I liked how you see that develop, like even early on, because it's like, especially like when like it seemed like it really clicked. Obviously, like when they spend enough time around each other, because she's just kind of like slowly like warming up to him. I think especially around the time he like put her finger back into place, I think it's when that really escalated. But just like the fact is that when she was training with Claire and then she ran into Danny, and just, oh, Danny, hey, it was almost like, wait, look at you, like, just like, I think that the actress who plays Colleen did a very good job, just because in that particular scene I was like, you're starting to like him, aren't you? Just because the fact is that she was just getting on, like, she was a little like, oh, hey, Danny, like, almost like she was nervous or something. I was like, oh, and he's like, oh yeah, for dinner. And she's like, wait, is this a date? He's like, no, what? No, it's not a date. She's like, oh yeah, good. I mean, he's like, not unless you, want it to be a date. It's just like, oh, you two are too damn cute. I'm glad that they're a couple. Just thought that was kind of interesting how like they had that situation of like, I'm trying to think, like, because everyone's relationship amongst the superheroes is extremely complicated. Daredevil had his whole thing with Karen. I mean, even has like thing with Claire, Jessica and Lucas. I mean, Jessica and Luke Cage. Luke Cage and granted his situation with his ex-wife, finding out more about her, then his whole situation with Claire, and now, like I said, you had this whole situation with Danny being extremely complicated. And since I keep bringing her up, I might as well like bring it around. As I thought Claire would pop up, she is literally the catalyst to all of this. I knew it, especially when she popped up in Luke Cage. It does seem like the only series she didn't have like that big of a role in was Daredevil. I mean, not was Jessica Jones. So I feel like out of any show so far, it seems like Luke Cage is the one she had the biggest part in. It seems like she plays a pretty big part in this one too, because it's like, because she even brings it up. She's like, my mom keeps bringing up the fact is I keep running into people like you all the time. And like, your life is, because I think Claire is actually someone from the comic books too. I don't remember if that's something I came across or whether I've had someone bring it up, but Claire Temple, the character, is someone from the comic books, I think. I don't know what her particular role is, but I kind of don't want to either, just because I don't want to spoil that for myself. But for one, Claire's a badass. I mean, see, she's taking lessons from Colleen, so she's learning how to because as we saw at the end of Luke Cage, she was picking up like a flyer for to go to learn self-defense, and I was like, the moment I saw that in the Luke Cage, I was like, and now that's how she meets Iron Fist. Granted, it wasn't under the circumstances. Because at the beginning we had the whole like Danny going to Colleen because he wanted to get a job from her. So I was thinking that was going to be the circumstances. But I mean, it kind of was. It was just kind of like indirectly she met him that way, because it's like she was training with Colleen, and then like she met Danny through Colleen like that. So, but once again, like she was a badass. Like there's that fight at the dojo, as well as the one in China where she was using those claw type weapons. So it's like, look at you, Claire, being a badass, like showing that you can handle yourself. I mean, she's been kind of caught in some very compromising positions, like, being surrounded all by these like vigilante like heroes. So it's a situation where it's like, okay, I can understand why you be like wanting to learn self-defense, because it's like, yeah, I just, in general, it'd be a good practice, but also just because it's like in case you end up bumping into someone else. And there was an interesting conversation she ended up having with Gal that I thought was kind of interesting. Like, Gal was like, oh, fact is, you surround yourself with all these gifted people hoping that it kind of rub off on you, but it hasn't. Like, almost like Claire wants to feel special just by being, and that she'll think she'll feel special by being around all these people, which Claire's like, no, it's not like that. It's just like, it was just kind of an interesting thing because Gal just naturally gets into people's heads like that, which I really appreciate about her character. I'm very interested to see like the more, like, we never really got to see more about it, but obviously she is part of the hand and everything, so she has a more mystical side of things on her. Because I mean, there was one point she ended up pushing Danny back with her hand, like kind of like a energy push. Like, you kind of see like air being like jettisoned at him to kind of push him back. So I want to see more about her. Like, she's not just a regular old lady, because she even referenced the fact that it's like, oh, like, you think you can like break me down with this torture and stuff? It's like, I've suffered worse back in the 1700s. So it's like, I mean, obviously we know the hand does its whole thing about, I didn't necessarily know about the whole immortality thing. I didn't. We do know about the whole like bringing people back from the dead situation, but obviously that's where their stories go. Kind of going. Also, like, going back to the conversation a little bit about with Claire, of how like that basically she ruins superheroes. That basically when she's like around them, she tries to help them, but all she does is ultimately leave them ruined, essentially. Like I said, because like everyone she's come across, like, it's not like their stories ended very happily. It's just they're kind of just like in very different states. Obviously, we left Matt where he is. Him and Foggy had their falling out, and just like the whole Elektra thing happened with Matt. Now telling Karen the truth. Jessica is like trying to figure out where she is now after the whole dealing with Kilgrave. Luke's in jail, which she did get some letters from him in his episode. She brings up the fact that she doesn't have a boyfriend, so I'm wondering, does that mean she called it quits between her and Luke, or is she just not really willing to admit? I do appreciate the fact that she's at least twice she said "Sweet Christmas," so it's like, oh, Luke's kind of rubbing off on you. But because I mean, I brought it up during Luke Cage too. It's like I kind of already know where like Luke's story goes, because I already know him and Jessica are like a thing in the comic books. So it's like I was like, I already knew that wasn't gonna last. So, but I'm very curious to see like how, like, obviously she's met everyone, so I'm very curious to see like how she ends up bringing everyone together. Other connections to other things, I do appreciate the fact is that this is what I'm talking, like, Karen was brought up because that's someone that Danny went to, like, because he's trying to run Rand in a very good way. The fact is that, he brought up the fact is like, oh, I leaked this story to Karen. So it's like, there was another one too. The fact is that Joy needed a PI that she was like, oh, I'm investigating. She ended up getting some dirt, and everyone, it's just like, yeah, she did a very good job when she wasn't drunk. I was like, Jessica. And I wonder like how recent that was, like in the storyline of things. I mean, obviously, because this is taking place after Luke Cage 2, chronologically speaking. So I think like, each show does chronologically take place in the point in time that the shows air. So this is probably like after the whole thing went down and Jessica Jones killed Graves dead and all that. So, but to kind of really get into it on other storylines, I was very fascinated by, well, for one, I kind of focus on, I've been kind of skipping around him, is Danny himself. Very different from the Danny that I knew from the Ultimate Spider-Man series, because that Danny, it's very zen. He never really let his emotions get the best of him. And that's something that I found very interesting. I was like, man, this Danny is like very angry. I mean, it's like, yeah, he's very, calm and cool and collected on some occasions, but more often than not, I was like, he's very angry, very different from the Iron, because I thought that's supposed to be Iron Fist's whole thing, just being calm, cool, and collected, just because he just seemed like a breathe in and breathe out type of dude. But it's like seeing this version of Danny, and it fit the show very well, because they bring note to it. That fact is that him and Davos bring it up. It's like they are very angry people, like they let their emotions get the best of them, and Danny shows it on multiple occasions where it's just like, everything he's been through, it just everything becomes a little overwhelming, and his emotions kind of flare up. He has to constantly apologize, because Kulan taught them, like, hey, you need to bury your emotions because a weapon isn't supposed to feel. And so that's why he's always kind of outbursting a little bit. And I was thinking like, okay, so what we're going to eventually do is see him progress and eventually turn into that chill dude, because it's going to be all about, controlling and essentially dealing with his shit, because, dealing with his family situation, like the fact is his family died, dealing with just everything now, the hand, being the Iron Fist, because I also like the storyline of like, fact is if he has to try and find out where he places all this, because the fact is he is the Iron Fist, yet he left Kunlun unprotected. His duty is to Kunlun. That's the whole point of the Iron Fist, to protect the past to Kunlun, so the hand doesn't get its way, and he also exists to destroy the hand. But the fact is, the whole storyline is also about him wanting to be Danny. Like, that's the whole reason why he came back. He didn't know what he wanted to do, come back. Everyone's telling him, like, oh, it's this reason, isn't it? It's this reason. Like, why did you come back? And it's because he wanted to be Danny Rand again. Because, for one, he wanted to find out the truth about his parents, but also, and that's why he fought, like, Rand so hard, because it's like, you had Joy and Ward being like, oh, we'll give you a settlement. But it's like, oh, wait, what? But I can't use my name anymore. He's like, no, the reason why I'm fighting you so hard is because you want to take my name from me. For Danny, it's not even a situation of like, I think 100% wanting to run the company. It's just kind of like he wanted a connection to his past. And it's like the world he came back to. I mean, it has been 15 years, but it's not the same world. And it was kind of an interesting thing because he thought he could feel voids in his heart. Like, he thought if he came back, maybe he could feel the void of like his parents not being there, by being around people like Joy and Ward, like everyone he knew in his life, like that centerfold of his life, that it could feel the hole inside of him. Just like he thought being with Kunlun and becoming the Iron Fist would fill the hole in his heart to fix him, because he felt broken, but even that wasn't enough to fix him. So I really appreciated that storyline. I'm very interested to see where they decide to take Danny in like a second season, or even going towards the Defenders, like dealing with that anger inside of him now that everything's kind of been settled with, considering like the hand and as well. Well, the hand isn't settled, but the whole Rand storyline. And talking about Rand, like I think I started recording so many times. I hate when I do that. When I restart recordings, I forget what I did, talk about what I didn't. But I'm pretty sure I brought it up in this recording, how I liked Ward and Joy's storyline. Even if I didn't bring it up, I'm bringing it up now. Especially Joy's, because I was so like, for one, Ward, I was like, from the very beginning, like, Ward is such a dick. I was hoping, I was like, okay, maybe he was a dick as a kid, so he won't be a dick. Oh, nope, even as an adult, you're a dick. You're a douchebag. Mainly because, I mean, everything, I feel, to me, like, Ward is one of those characters you walk away from the season being like, yeah, I kind of feel bad for you. It's like, the reason why you were such a dick is because your dad is such a huge asshole, and he was so abusive to you, like punching you and beating you down, all for the purposes of quote unquote toughening you up. Every decision he ever made, the reason why he took pop pills and stuff like that was because his dad was legitimately driving him crazy. He had to keep his secret, which eventually Joy found out and was like super pissed that him and Danny kept it from him. But it's like the fact of the matter is, I think it's a situation where Ward always saw that side of his dad, and he wanted to protect his little sister. Yeah, he wanted to protect his little sister from it. So it's understandable why Ward did what he did, and everything for the purposes of servicing his dad, making it so that it's like, oh yeah, because on some level I think he wanted to, like, he hated his dad a lot, and I think it was a situation where he just wanted to obviously run away. Even like, he even tells Joy, he's like, oh, did you ever think about just leaving this life behind? And then he had that secret account. Granted, I was like, oh, you stockpiled money. Oh, that's your runaway money, which it was, but it's like, oh, you've been embezzling from Rand. Oh, I mean, I think more so than anything, he never really cared as much about Rand. I think he did on some level, but that was mainly because it's like, oh, him and Joy, which was a fun aspect of it. But then there was a terrible aspect of it because every move he made was for the purposes of Harold, being in his beck and call. But like everything they did to kind of basically tear Danny down is what kind of surprised me, especially from Joy, because it's like, oh, at first Joy drugs him, and then Joy's like, oh, helping him out with the whole fingerprint thing, which I thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, huh, you had that, like, you're helping Danny out, but then, like, it's like her character's always back and forth. She was mostly on Danny's side until the very end, because it was just kind of like, Especially because, I mean, her and Davos, like, I'll appreciate Davos' storyline too. Because I really quickly want to bring that up. Is Davos the same character I'm thinking of from Ultimate Spider-Man? Because in Danny's story, there was someone he had to fight. I don't remember if that was Davos or that was someone else. But there was someone who stood in his way because they were like, oh, you became the Iron Fist. I don't appreciate that. So I'm thinking that might have been Davos. Might have been someone else too. But Davos' whole storyline of like, oh, like, you were like a brother to me. And the fact is that you betrayed me because you abandoned your position. It's like, more so than anything, it's not even, there is a part of him that's like, oh, duty bound, like, oh, the fact is you abandoned us, you are the Iron Fist. But it was also jealousy and personal abandonment. It's like, it's not even about Kunlun. It's like, you abandoned me. We were like brothers. I always had your back and you left me behind. It's like, there's that. Plus the fact is like, I trained all my life to become the Iron Fist and they gave it to some outsider like you. At first I accepted that, but then the fact is you run off and you take the Iron Fist with you to do whatever you want to. And it's like, that's what that's what he didn't appreciate. And even to the point him and Danny ended up fighting, and Danny had to be like, I am Danny Rand and I am the Iron Fist, kind of accepting the fact is that those two sides are who he is, that he doesn't have to choose between the two, that he is both. Because I feel like, obviously, like Danny even brought it up, like there's a duality to life, and I feel like it's very apparent for him, because the other superheroes, like the only other one that really has that duality is Matt as Daredevil. He lives that duality, but like Jessica and Luke are just them. Like, it's like, this is who I am. Because I kept wondering, I was like, too, like, it's like, they bring up Daredevil, they bring up Luke Cage, but it's like, why don't they bring up, I was like, right, because no one really knows about, because Jessica's story was actually very compact. Like, Luke's story and Daredevil's stories blew up, but Jessica kind of she's a private investigator, so she kind of keeps things low-key. I was like, right, because no one really knows about her having superpowers, do they? Because she kind of keep that well hidden. It's like, that's at least my, like, way of interpreting that, because it's like, she never got brought up in conversations, but it's like, no, her story is very, like, close-knit. Only the people in her personal life know about her having powers, so like outside of that, no one really knows. I don't even think Hogarth really knows, because even she was kind of like, okay, whatever you say, when Danny brings up the fact is that Hero came back from the dead, she's like, okay, don't you ever say that again, which I really appreciate Hogarth being in this, just because I love Carrie Ann Moss. I was not expecting her to be in this, and in fact, I love the fact is that like Danny's nickname for her is J Money. It's like, what? Because apparently she actually used to work for Danny's dad, Wendell. Wasn't expecting her to pop up like she did, which is she the only, I think the only thing she hasn't popped up in now was Luke Cage. I mean, even in this, she had like a big role in it, because the whole point of her storyline was to help Danny get his company back, especially because, Wendell helped her out a lot and stuff like that. So I also like her seeing like Harold being back and everything. She's like, wow. Like, she handled that pretty well. It's like, okay. I mean, she rationalized it as being like, hey, the fact of the matter is you are kind of, you faked your death all this time, huh? That's like, that's fraud. Which at the same time too is like, Kilgrave is a thing, but I mean, I guess it's still a part of her brain that's like, I mean, everyone's, especially, Iron Fist's whole storyline is literally the more magical aspect of bringing people back from the dead and stuff like that, which, people who are on the inner circle know it to be true, but it's a situation where it's like, nah, of course she's kind of like not going to believe all that, because, I mean, who would? I mean, it's a hard thing for anyone to believe, especially Claire, especially when Davos brought up, what's his name? Shaolin, the dragon that bestows people the Iron Fist. He's like, oh, what's a dragon? Oh, you mean like a Komodo dragon? Or are you talking about like Pete's dragon? And he's like, I don't know what Pete's dragon is, but it is it is infinite, which is like, that's a storyline I went into this knowing about the fact that that's how he got his powers, is literally from a dragon. Granted, certain things made me think like he had to kill the dragon to get the powers. It doesn't, I mean, obviously in this, it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case. It was more so a trial. He beat the trial, and we don't really know explicitly what it was. Side note, did not know that's what that whole tattoo situation was. I thought that was just kind of a Kunlun thing anyway, though. Tattoo on his chest of the dragon, I thought that was just part of it. It's like, no, that's the mark of the Iron Fist. So, Also, the whole like Kunlun thing. Anyway, it is kind of. I didn't know that because, like I said, it's been a while since I saw that Spider-Man episode with that dived into Danny's past, but I wasn't sure. I didn't remember that being a whole aspect of like basically the path to Kunlun can only be open for a certain amount of time. That's why it took Danny 15 years to get back, because at that time, I mean, the pathway probably opened at some point during that 15 years, but he didn't really know it was open until like that 15-year mark, because he like saw a sign. He saw that eagle flying and was like, oh, it went down the mountains. Like, oh, Kunlun is open. But I kind of heavily got away from it. But the sole storyline of the fact is that Davos is actually talking to Joy at the end of the show, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to have to remove Danny. She's like, what does that mean? It's like, we're going to have to kill Danny. And she's like, tell me more. I'm like, really, Joy? It's like, I mean, I understand like I said, like it's a whole back and forth of her character, and that's what's kind of interesting. Like, her and Ward had completely different reactions. Ward hated Danny from the beginning, but eventually became like a friend to him. They obviously buried a hatchet. He ended up helping and warning Danny about the whole Harold situation. Like, yo, Harold set you up hard. And then you had the whole joy of being like more open to him. Obviously, because like Danny made her change a lot, because like he wanted to be like, he handled things like a better person would, like the whole like drug situation. Like he wanted to sell the drug at cost, because it's like it takes like $5 to make the drug, and it's like whoa, but you want to like overprice it. It's like, what about people who can't afford it? It's like, no, we sell it at cost the company like millions doing that. But it's a situation where Joy found herself being like, no, because Danny made her kind of question who she's always been all this time, because like, she's been very almost bloodthirsty like, and I guess that's something she kind of shares with her dad, Harold, in that sense. But I thought it was kind of interesting to see that at the very end, it's like she hates Danny because Danny threw her life in a turmoil. It's because of him being back, everything. It's like, no, your life was always this way. You just didn't know it because you had someone like Ward protecting. But then again, that's why she doesn't like Ward or Danny. It's because they lied about the whole situation, lied about her dad still being alive. It's like, oh, these past like couple, what was it, like 12 or 13 years she lived thinking her dad was dead, and he was there the entire time. But also on top of that, finding out her dad was dead. Like, all her life got flipped upside down because of Danny and Ward. So obviously she holds animosity towards him, and Davos holds animosity towards him, because it's like, yo, I guess on some level I'm thinking that he's going to think if he can kill Danny, then he's like, I can rightfully claim the Iron Fist as my own, because I've trained my entire life for it. It's rightfully mine. At least that's how I'm seeing it, especially why he would do what he did. I'm very interested, because at the end, I'll kind of go ahead and skip to it. It's like, as we know, like at the end, like the whole hand infiltrating Kunlun and basically it having to disappear. The pathway was still open, but the fact is that Kunlun, like Danny wasn't there to protect it, so it kind of disappeared. I don't think the hand, as we saw, there were hand people outside that were dead, but they probably got inside, and just to prevent any more from getting inside, they probably actually moved the entire place. So I'm wondering, like, did Davos switch sides or something, or is he staying loyal to Kunlun, which I think he is. I think him wanting to kill Danny is just his own personal thing. That's not like he switched sides and joined the hand or something like that. It is kind of interesting that Gal is like on the other side listening to this conversation. But granted, Davos and Joy never actually met Gal, so they wouldn't recognize who she is when she overhears this whole plan. It makes you wonder, like, what's her part going to play in all of this too? Is she going to try and offer them help without kind of hiding who she is? Like, oh, I can help you defeat Danny and stuff like that. So, but I'm also interested by the way that Harold's storyline played out too, because the fact of the matter is just everything he did, from locking Danny up in that mental facility. I'm pretty sure that was more his idea than it was Ward's, because he was the one that kind of had cameras on. I felt so bad for Danny, because Danny was so close to getting that doctor convinced, because the doctor was like, oh, I believe you're Danny Rand. But then Danny started bringing up everything else. He's like, oh. I was like, oh, Danny, you were so close until you kept running your mouth. You should have shut up. You shouldn't have said anything about the Iron Fist and everything. One, I'm surprised the doctor didn't change it. I would have loved to see what the doctor said when Danny, because even you saw Simon kind of looking at him, and Danny's running, summons up the Iron Fist and busts out. I'm like, where was the security cameras for that? Where was the doctor being like, oh crap, right? Because we never actually got to see what his whole storyline was about. I mean, I would have loved to seen his reaction when he saw the cameras, like, oh, holy crap. Danny wasn't lying about all that. Like, oh, he has powers. Okay. I mean, maybe in some level he's like, oh, you just have powers. I was I was surprised he didn't pop up later on in the story like, oh, Danny, I'm here to talk to you. It's like, yeah, you're really Danny Rand, but the fact of the matter is, obviously you still suffered a trauma, and the fact of the matter is that all this stuff that happened to you. Because what I was interested in, because excuse me, was even Harold brought it up. I was like, I was surprised that he was actually trying to help Danny. I was like, oh, I thought you're there to keep him down, and like the whole like, what's the John Anderson passport situation? I'm like, oh, you're trying to like make him think he's crazy and stuff like that. It's like, oh no, the Anderson passport thing is real because Danny did have that, but it's not because that's his real identity. That's how he was able to get back in the country. He needed a fake ID passport which said he was from Canada. And I was like, oh, so never mind. I thought like this was a whole framing situation. It's just like he lied about it because it's like I mean, he didn't want to admit that he illegally got into the country like that. But I was thinking like maybe the doctor would pop up later on and be like, hey, like the fact is I'm here to help you, Danny. Like obviously you are Danny Rand, but it's very not good for you to be here. Obviously you're suffering some issues. But once again, maybe he did see what Danny did and was like, oh, never mind. I'm not going to touch that. That's his own thing. So, but Harold like playing him like a fiddle the entire time. Not just him, everyone. Obviously manipulating and using Ward, which Ward saw him for who he really was. He even tried to warn Danny. He's like, be careful of him. He's like, no, be careful of Harold. Don't trust him. Try to tell him ahead of time. Gal even told him the truth, like, oh, the fact is that Harold, is the one that, that Danny should look out for. But he was so against believing Gal. Because the fact of the matter is, like, Gal even said it herself. She never lied to him. She never once lied to Danny. Because she even brought up the fact it's like, oh, because I was wondering what she meant when she was like, oh yeah, Colleen, you and Danny won't last because the fact that you're down different paths. I was wondering what she meant by that. It's like, oh, is it because she has a different destiny? And it's like, oh, because actually she's secretly with the Hand. So it's like, oh, that makes even more sense now. It's like, well, truth be told, this Gal never did necessarily lie. Yes, she played mind games, always trying to get inside of people's head, but more so, it's interesting. The fact of the matter is that she looked at Danny and she actually did try to help him out in her own way. Because more so than anything, she wanted Danny out of the picture because it's like Danny being in a way just complicated things. That's why she was like, I told Harold not to do the whole window thing because it would draw too much attention. But it's like, no, Harold was greedy, wanted the company and stuff for himself. I thought it was kind of interesting. I never expected him to kind of come out of the light. I was wondering if he was going to do that, but he kind of did it at the very end. So I was like, oh, here you are making your big move. Now that the Hand's been removed from the situation, you turned the DEA against Danny, making all those transactions done by the Hand. You're making it look like Danny did. Now he has to be on the run. I was like, man, no superhero can catch a break, can they? Especially because Claire's like, yeah, you don't want to. The justice system sucks. It's like, yeah, it's kind of screwed over Luke. So even after all he's done, and it's like, oh, Danny's done, and it's like, no, it's here to kind of screw him over. But I also like the storyline of the fact is like him coming back to life thing. Excuse me. The moment Ward killed him, I was like, okay, he's not dead. I was like, okay, I guess he is dead. I was halfway expecting him to pop. Oh, you pop up later on, but he's kind of a little disjointed. And talking to the Hatchet Man, the leader of the Hatchet Man was basically like, oh yeah, every time someone comes back to life, they come back a little bit crazier. Because there's one particular guy that kept dying on the battlefield. It's like a story he had heard when he was younger, like a story from his village that basically, or it was someone, I think maybe like his grandfather's village or something like that. But essentially it was a guy that kept dying on a battlefield, and each time like he was associated with the Hand and kept getting brought back to life every time. And because of it, he eventually snapped and literally roasted two of his kids. So his wife took his child and left. Because like every time you die and come back, you come back a little bit crazier. So that's why he's so... he was probably already a douchebag, but on top of like dying and coming back, because it was kind of interesting seeing him first pop up too, like when he first came back, because he was just kind of like all apologetic to Ward, and you had Ward being like, okay, what the fuck is going on here? Why are you getting all crying and apologizing and everything? Which I love the fact is that like he was like, no, Ward, you want to leave, you can leave, and it's like, he didn't really mean that, especially when he ended up stealing all of Ward's money. I was like, I knew that was coming. Of course your dad's not going to let you go. You're not going to escape his grasp that much, especially when he brought up the fact that it's like, oh, Joy? Oh yeah, I guess I'll have to, because Ward was going to go, but I'm surprised he didn't immediately stay for Joy's sake, because the whole point of him doing everything for his father was to protect her from him. It's like, he's like, no, stay away from Joy. But he's like, I have no choice. My only son is leaving, so I have to rely on my only daughter. And it's like, but for Ward, it was more so than anything. He just needed to get away from his dad. But even then, he couldn't get away from those clutches. I even like the story of like when he was killing those dudes in front of Danny, and Danny's like, what are you doing? Because Danny's kind of not big on killing people, just kind of goes against who he is and his nature, even though he wants to kill Harold later on. Even points where he wanted to kill Gal just because it's like, you had everything to do with my family's death. But there's a moment like he had slit that dude's throat, and then like he was bashing their teeth out with a hammer, and I was just like, ugh. And even Ward was just kind of about to throw up, and I love the fact that Ward's about to grab that bucket, and he sees a finger, and he's just like, has to kind of hold it back and everything. Also, like, the fact is that he killed his assistant, Kyle. I love the fact that he brought up the conversation with Kyle, being like, Kyle, if you could do anything, if you found out, like, you didn't have to worry about life, that you almost had, like, an immortal life. He's like, what would you do? He's like, oh, I'd have lunch. I'd have ice cream for breakfast. He's like, yeah, and lunch. And he's just like, amazing. He's like, oh, thank you, sir. He's like, it wasn't a compliment. I think in a sense, basically, he was calling Kyle a basic-ass bitch. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But also the fact is that he killed Kyle. I knew it was over when Kyle was like, oh, do you have any vanilla? I was like, oh, you idiot. He's like, vanilla. He's like, I'm not really into all that fancy stuff. He's like, I got all these fancy ice creams, and up here you're talking about you're being ungrateful and like all you want is vanilla. He's like, oh, no, this is all good, sir. And he's like, no. And then I wasn't sure, but he bashed Kyle, not really bashed his head in, but stabbed Kyle's head repeatedly with an ice cream scooper, right? Felt really bad for Kyle. He's like, it's just ice cream, sir. He's like, just shut up and die already. And it's like, oh, Kyle, what did I do? So I'm going back to the whole point of like, man, he was crazy. I was kind of halfway expecting him to be like the dude that's in Daredevil. I don't even remember his name now, but he's the one that, quote unquote, died in the first season, but as we saw, he kind of got brought back in the second season. I'm guessing it was a situation where he always was like that. It seems like that's going to be a big... I'm very curious to see where the hand goes. Is that just going to be... It seems like that's heavily a Daredevil thing, because obviously Daredevil and Elektra are tied to it. But it's also going to be like a heavy Danny situation, because I wasn't expecting like that. I didn't know who like the antagonist of this season was going to be. And then like when I started thinking about it, I was like, the hand kind of makes sense for them to be your antagonist. It's like, because we already set them up on Daredevil, so we already know they're a thing. But also how far their reach is, because we ended up seeing like Bakuto had like all these security cameras like all around. Like, so they have eyes literally everywhere, not just in the sense, in the sense of like they have agents everywhere. It doesn't hurt. The fact is that Bakuto kind of raised an army of his own that included kids who were younger, like kind of kids who were on the street. He kind of took them in and gave them a home. That's what Colleen kind of did. She was almost like a recruiter. She just wanted to give them purpose. It's like, the hand was there for her when she needed them. They were kind of like the family she didn't have. It really sucked when things kind of turned the way they did, because for Colleen, it's like leaving the hand hurt a lot, because it meant like turning her back on the people that were like family to her. The only family she's ever known for such a long time, people that she relied on so heavily, that a place that she believed in so heavily. So, but the point I was going to make is I thought like Harold was going to come back with like some supernatural powers. Like, no, Harold stayed 100% human. I thought like it's going to be like a situation where he started getting like some supernatural abilities. So, to a certain degree he did. So, but I'm wondering, are we 100% done with Harold? They did burn his body, because like the way to stop someone who's immortal is to like slice off their head. That's their weakness. They won't come back after that. But I'm very Ward and Danny ended up cremating his body. No one else really knows the reasoning behind that. Like, I wonder how much does Joy really know now? She knows everything now, so she probably understands why they did that. Now, going forward, we have Danny and Ward are kind of the heads of Rand now. Kind of like, okay, let's lead this place like our fathers couldn't. In the sense of like, because, Danny's dad always had Harold like behind him wanting to kill him and basically take the whole operation, but he's like, now that my dad's going, it's like, I'm gonna lead the company like our parents should have done, and that was together, rather than having Harold scheming behind his back the entire time. But luckily it wasn't Danny who killed him, because Danny was like not trying to give into his rage, so he backed down. I was very curious to see if Danny was going to do it, and he did. Like, I'm great that he only blocked the bullet with the Iron Fist, rather than, I was thinking like at one point like you'll have someone like you'll have him like get shot at, and then he uses the Iron Fist to like grab the bullet. I mean, because granted, like the Iron Fist doesn't work this obviously, for the sake of probably like a budget as well as just like a easier way to kind of display it. It's like obviously his fist glows. The fact of the matter is like, obviously from his comic book version to like how it works in the how it works in Ultimate Spider-Man is there's more of an energy around his fist. It glows like almost like a fire around his fist. So if he wanted to, he could probably sweep his hand and like burn a bullet with his hand. At least that's how I was thinking. But obviously with the way it is now, it's just like, it's like his fist is his fist kind of literally hardened. So it's like he can block with him. Which I also appreciate the fact is that when speaking about the Iron Fist, because I was thinking by the end of it, I was like, okay, so he's going to end up having 2 Iron Fists. Because as we know that, that's the progression of the Iron Fist. I can't remember if it passes to the rest of the body too. I think it's been a while since I've seen Ultimate Spider-Man, but I think in that he eventually got the second fist. I don't remember. I was thinking that's where it was going to eventually end, but obviously that's probably going to be much further on, later on down his storyline. I think that's kind of interesting too, like, because it seems like, I mean, that's kind of a typical superhero thing, especially in the Marvel universe, but I mean, just any superhero universe. I mean, in the DC, for example, like the mantle always passing down. But the Iron Fist is also known as the immortal weapon that basically it's always being passed down from person to person. Like I said, Danny's like the first outsider to ever become the Iron Fist. So anyway, I'm very interested to see like what he decides to do. Like I said, the whole duality, because he is the only superhero that's been really set up to like have that, like keep his I mean, Danny really he kind of did a Luke Cage thing where it's like, he was always out there with his face out there. But I mean, to be fair, like most of his actions were kind of done in the shadows, so no one really got to see him really go all out. I mean, with the exception of the DEA situation near the end, but other than that, it was just kind of like Danny's action as the Iron Fist were kind of kept low key. So I mean, kind of probably more keen to Jessica Jones' actions too. It's like no one really knew what Jessica was. Like I said, that was kind of a more low-key situation rather than being the very blown-up situation it was. I think I was about to bring it up earlier because I brought up the whole Harold situation, but I'm very interested to see what happened to Bakuto. Like, obviously him and Colleen had their fight, which I really like. The fact is that she, like, that part of her sword broke off and she like flipped and kicked it into us. Like, I was like, yeah, kick his ass, Colleen. But also it's like like they're saying like, oh, he's dead, but the fact is maybe Bakuto was like Harold, because they were like, oh, the hand probably got him and carried him away. I mean, because obviously we know there's like a lot of that storyline that's still not done with, because the fact is when Colleen and Danny went back there later on, they at the hand compound, it was like none of them were dead, none of the students, like Daryl, for example, because even Bakuto brought it up. The fact is, oh, Daryl, he's a young one, like, oh, like he'll be a use for us later on. So it's kind of like, what does that mean? It's got to suck for Colleen too, because most of the students she set up were pushed to go to the hand, and now she sees the hand for what it really is. So I'm also curious to see how this like all eventually like ties in with Daredevil and stuff like that. How because obviously the hand's got its whole situation with Elektra bringing her back to life like they are. Once again, kind of like the downside of like coming back from the dead is like what it eventually does to your mind and stuff like that. So that is something she's going to have to worry about now that we've kind of really tapped in. I can't remember if we really covered that at all in Daredevil, but we've covered it here. So obviously it's going to have ramifications in Daredevil too. So, but like I said, overall, really loved it. That's a sad thing about doing these, watching Netflix shows, because I binge on them like immediately. But I'm very interested to see where things go forward. Like I said, Ward's character, I was kind of hoping he end up being who he is now, where it seems like, okay, we're good. The fact is he knows everything now. And in fact, like, I'm very interested to see where him and Joy's storyline goes going forward, because it's like, hey, he's working with Danny, and obviously you have Joy being against Danny. Like, will she come back to Rand as a means of trying to get close to Danny so she can kill him? Obviously, like, her and Davos are working together. Because Davos brought up the fact that there would be consequences for what Danny did, and I guess this is his. I mean, the whole Kumlan situation, but also this. Also, a little side note I thought was kind of interesting. Obviously, if you might not have known, I don't know if you know this, but the actor who plays Ward, he played a character named Kurt in Banshee. He ended up showing up like halfway through season 3, and he was one of the main characters in the final 4th season. But also the actor who played, I'm pretty sure it was him, I could be wrong, but there was the guy that Danny kept seeing during those fights with Madame Gao and her people. Basically that trial by combat a situation is like a fight to the death to, it's like, it's all about getting that, dude's daughter back. The person he kept seeing, the Thunderer, I think that was, I'm pretty sure the actor's name is Hoon Lee, who played Job, which I feel so bad I had to look up Job's name. I can't remember his character's name, and I felt so bad because like I really love Job. It was just kind of like they're both like characters. They're both from Banshee, and so I just thought that was kind of interesting. It's also interesting too is that neither one of them popped up. Like obviously Ward was kind of like a recurring thing. Thunderer was kind of like a one-off thing. I mean, he popped up in maybe 2 episodes. One was just 100% voiceover. Another one he actually popped up in. But so they were never actually in the same scenes together. And I don't think they were ever in the same scene in Banshee either. Just something interesting that popped up in my head. I also like brought up, I thought that's kind of interesting. Like I brought it up earlier, like the whole like him, them wanting Danny to be a living weapon. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, the girl's life is about, it's like you have Gal being like, oh, I'm gonna kill this girl if you kill him. But you have Thunderer being like, no, strike him down now. You exist to kill the hand. But for him, it's like, just feeding the hand is good and everything, but he's not going to risk other people's lives for it. It's like you have the Thunderer kind of turning his back away from him. It's like, but Danny shouldn't have to be a killer to, and he learns that it's like, I don't have to be that way just to be the Iron Fist, that I can find another way, that the Iron Fist doesn't exist just to protect Kunlun, that it exists to protect, it can be used to protect other people to the right other wrongs, so I'm very interested to see what the Hand would have done with someone like Danny if they were able to get him to their side, especially because Bakuto and Colleen were there to kind of make his transition easier. It does make you wonder at what point, because when Bakuto first popped up, I was like, oh, is he like your secret boyfriend or something? I was like, what is? I was like, no, it doesn't seem like that, because it's like you're bringing up Danny and stuff like that. I was like, oh, who is he? It's like I wasn't expecting him to turn into the antagonist that he ended up turning into. So that was, like I said, it also had very nice like twists and turns, like just character wise like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I'm very excited to see what they decide to do with a second season. Also, I brought up earlier, like what this means going forward with the Defenders and stuff like that. I'm super excited because, like I said, I'm curious to see if the Hand is going to play a part in Defenders. Because I do know, I haven't looked into it too much. It's stuff I've heard here and there from other people. But Sigourney Weaver is being said, like, I don't know who her character is, but she's playing the main antagonist of the Defenders. So now I'm sitting here thinking about it. Like, most of the main antagonists for these series have been, like, humans. Like, for instance, season 1, it was Wilson Fisk. So Jessica Jones and Iron Fist are the only ones that actually even in Iron Fist's case, like obviously you had Harold manipulating the whole situation so he could get the Hand out of the way so that he can come back from the dead and reclaim what was his. But it's like, even Luke Cage's situation, it was like regular people were his main antagonists. Obviously, it won't go too deeply into like spoilers for that in case you haven't watched it. I'm also very interested to see where that goes, because part of me was also thinking like, oh, at the end of this, Danny gets sent to jail and that's how him and Luke. Because I do know there's a whole like Heroes for Hire storyline, so I was very interested to see. Obviously, like I said, everyone's going to come together, but I'm very interested to see where like everyone's storyline can go, because it's like you have like Jessica being a PI, and it's like, what's that going to do when it comes to the Heroes for Hire situation? It's like, I'm very interested to see how that goes, because like I said, Luke Cage is already out there. He has superpowers and everything. Everybody knows his face. So what would Danny do? Would Danny have to disguise himself? Especially if he wants to run Rand. So they might not do that storyline because, unless Danny put on a costume and hid his identity and worked with Luke, not unless it was like a low-key thing. It's like, oh, I'm running Rand and I'm also helping Luke on the side. I'm very curious to see how that, I want all the actors to meet. Because Claire at the end of Luke Cage was like, oh, I know a good lawyer. So it's like, obviously maybe Matt and Luke have met. Maybe. We'll just have to see. Not less he ended up meeting with Foggy. But I'm so interested to see everyone come together. I'm super excited to see, after this, I'm going to look up a little more information. Maybe I'll make a video about anything I find out about the Defenders going forward. So like I said, if anything, it probably won't be until like September, maybe October at the latest, when we'll kind of see anything about the Defenders. So I'm super excited to see what they do with that, but also very excited to see what they do with a season 2 of Iron Fist. I really, really like it. like I said, I've seen, I'm not tried because I don't really like listening to reviews or, it's like, oh, like, I am interested to hear what other people's thoughts are on these things. Like, I have my opinion on it. I do, like I said, I brought it up earlier. I've heard stuff here and there where people didn't like this series, just because people kind of found like I said, it's not as like, the story isn't always like pushing head first. Like, I'm not, I feel like if I say it a certain way, like it's almost like I'm shitting on the other shows. It's like I brought up earlier, the best way I can put it is it has very different pacing. Like, it has very different storytelling. It has a very calm storytelling of like, some people might consider like the downtimes in the show, especially when it comes to stuff with Ward and Joy and the Rand situation, they found that boring. So it's not, like I say, it's not as action packed as a lot of people were kind of expecting it to be, because it is, Iron Fist, they're thinking, like I said, like I went into it thinking the same thing, that it's going to be a lot more like Daredevil, which it does. It shares the similarities, but I also brought, I talked about the big differences too. So, but overall, I really liked it. But I think that's all I really wanted to talk about in this episode. So till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.